this learning session, we'll take a look at archiving projects with Revizto. And a few different ways we can do that with Revizto. So for Revizto, during the project coordination is the main tool or main source for some of those markups going back and forth, or communication happening over the cloud in the issue tracker. Right. The question becomes, what do we do with that information when it when the project comes to a close? Where does that information go? How do we archive it? That way, if anything comes up down the road, especially for designers, sometimes that happens 3-4 years after the work's complete on the project. We want to be able to reference that information once the project is closed out. So in the issue tracker, as shown, these are all the different issues in the project. This is where I'll reference all the back and forth going through, whether that's internal or external, through the consultants or owners of the project. And again, where do I put that information once the project is over? So if I navigate to the web-based workspace through the issue tracker using the reporting button, and I pull open the information on a web browser, this is where in the project workspace I can set things like dashboards, reports, get to my project team, set other settings, etc. But the one I want to look at is project info. So from this workspace, this is where we can adjust the title if we need to, set an abbreviation, maybe even change owners if we're doing a handoff process, or switch between the licenses. But this is also where I can get to the archive feature. So what this is going to do is take the live Revizto project, archive it to the cloud. So here we'll have a couple prompts. We can choose to archive the project, and that's going to remove it from the project list, right? So in some Revizto licenses, you're capped out at, say, 40 licenses, but we can always restore that back to the project. So once archived, if I need to bring that back into a live Revizto project, I can, select restore. That's going to bring it back active, back live on the cloud, and I can go back and reference that information. And this shows up a couple different places, so we can restore it here. We can also come up to our tools, and under project directory, we can get to the projects as well. And I mentioned there was a cap out on some project licenses, right? So at the top, you can reference this information. So it looks like I have 2 out of unlimited in this license, but in some instances that might cap out at 20 or 40. So I want to point out here that when you archive a project, it does remove it from the project list. But at any time, again, if I want to come back in here, activate the project again, I can select it from this list, go to restore, and then again, that's going to bring the project back live. So a really effective system. Again, if I do need to go back to those, any of the issues, any of the comments made, verify a couple things within the project. So additionally, I'll have the option here to, reference all that information. But another avenue I can take is going back into the project workspace and packaging all of these issues up into an archivable report. And the way I found best to do this is by using the dashboard system. So here in your project workspace, you can get to your dashboards. For example, I have, a couple charts here under project health just for overall referencing of issues. But what I can do is add a new dashboard, and I'm just going to call this, archive dashboard, right? So we'll go ahead and save that to the project. Under that dashboard, I can, generate a new chart. So give it a name of, project. You'll probably have a project number, for example, and then, dash archive. So here you have a few different chart options. I always like to pick bar. That's really personal preference, but just visually, I think it reads better. And then you can set what information you want to include in the chart, right, by your grouping or filtering for issues. I like to group by assignee and then respective status of those issues. And this just gives me a really nice visual view of who's been assigned issues in the project. And maybe for archiving purposes, maybe there's some issues left open in the project, and you can quickly reference those with this interactive chart. But what this chart's going to allow me to do now is send this out to a PDF report where I can package up all those issues again. And from that, excuse me a minute, get back to my workspace here. From that chart, with the assignee included, with the status of those issues included, it's going to take everything that's been put into the issue tracker and give me a referenceable PDF that I can go back to at any point. Again, if there's something that comes up in the project, I need to go back, make sure, markups were picked up, what happened here. So where I can do that is to go into my dashboard system, send this chart out. The format, we have a couple different options here if we want to send it out as a PDF, which gives us the chart only, or an Excel spreadsheet. But the option I want to choose here is PDF with issues, right? In the PDF options, these are pretty important as well. So a few different toggles here. I can include the company logo. It's a good one to choose if you want to, just include that information on the cover sheet. Include comments. That's also a really useful option to include, especially when archiving, because the comments made back and forth in the issue tracker, again, are really important. If maybe something was said between you and your structural engineer and something, later on down the line isn't working properly in the project, you'll want to be able to search for that information. So here's where I can, include company logo, include my comments, including updates. That's also another really important one, I think, for an archivable report to include, in this information, right? So the updates are going to be, and this is where I have my chat feature here. But the updates, right? So I want to include any updates in the archivable report as well, right? So maybe, for instance, maybe I assigned issues out to one person, and for example, in the project somewhere down the line, the issue assignee changed, right? So I'll want to be able to go back and track that information if for instance, something wasn't picked up or needed to be corrected in the project. So I'll make sure to go ahead and include updates. Bigger images is really personal preference. I think, unless the issue tracker was used out on site to take photos, or punch listing workflows, I think the smaller images do a good enough job to go back and reference that information. And then as I go down here, so there is an ordering system I can include on these reports, right? So I like to leave it as is. I mean, the ID and ascending by. So the issue ID is obviously, referenced in the issue list. So you'll have an ID you can reference here. If you know that, great, but it just gives you a nice list, from 1 to 133 of what those issues are. And then, if I keep going down in some of my options, the time and date format, maybe doesn't really help me in an archivable report situation. So I leave those alone. But what I'll do is just send this out to my own email, and we'll pull that open here in a minute and take a look. That's going to give me a, again, really nice report that I can save, whether it be to a network drive or, a local file, maybe even a project file if we do, already have a archiving process in place. So I wanted to point that out as far as, as far as one avenue to take. But another thing to look at related to Revizto is I can also export this project out as an Exe file, right? So if I navigate up to project, export to Exe, what this is going to allow me to do is spit out an archived file that's going to act just like the, live cloud-based issue tracker would, only without the, cloud-based features. So it's going to give me a snapshot of all the 3D geometry, all the data of the sheets, the issues, the issue history. And the one really important thing to do when archiving the project is make sure I have export issues as, a yes. I want to export all those issues. I want to be able to, pull this Exe file up, if I need to go back to it, see some communication or reference some markup in the project. So again, I'll hit save. That might be to a local file. That might be to, a network drive that you're using. And yeah, so what I'll do now is just pull open that PDF report. We can take a look at that. And see just briefly how that's formatted to go back and reference. Right, so once that archive report is in my email, I'm going to go ahead and pull it open here. It's going to be in, again, in PDF format. And that's, again, I included my company logo. I gave the report a title. It'll have a date, project thumbnail. As I go down here, it's going to give me, the title of the project. Again, the thumbnail. It will have a heading of that chart we looked at, in the dashboarding system. And then, that gives me a visual indicator of, who's in the project, on the project team, what the status of those issues were when I archived the project. And as I go down the line here, it's going to give me a really nice list of all of the issues, again, by ID, whether those were clash issues or markups in the project, 2D and 3D. And then again, it'll have included in it some of the communication, title of the issues, and just gives me a searchable document I can go back to, pull open, and reference, again, if there's any ever any conflicts later on down the line in the project.